From self-protection to spiritual freedom, learning to live in goodwill. There's a moment in recovery when you suddenly realize that everything you thought you knew about helping others, being a good person, or doing the right thing barely scratches the surface of what goodwill actually means. It doesn't hit you all at once. It shows up in small, unexpected spaces. A pause before reacting, a softening where you used to tense, a willingness to show up even when no one is watching. And then, almost out of nowhere, you catch yourself doing something you wouldn't have done in your first 90 days, or your first year, or even last month, and you think, where did that come from? Goodwill doesn't announce itself. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't try to shine or perform or be admired. Goodwill works quietly beneath the surface, reshaping not just what you do, but the energy behind why you do it. You start out trying to not cause harm, or trying to fix the messes you used to create. But over time, something deeper begins growing inside you. Something steadier, something kinder, something that isn't about being seen as good, but about wanting to bring good into the spaces you occupy, simply because it feels right. For many of us, that shift is one of the biggest surprises of recovery. We didn't come here looking to become more loving. We didn't walk into our first meeting thinking we'd grow into people who care about the well-being of others. We came here trying to stop the chaos, trying to survive the consequences, trying to quiet the storms inside us. But somewhere along the way, goodwill becomes less of an action and more of a way of living. And when that happens, recovery stops being something you do and becomes something you are becoming. My name is Steve. I'm a recovering addict, and this is On Life's Terms, the place where we explore the lived, breathing reality of recovery, not just the slogans on the wall or the words on the page. If you're new here, I'm truly glad you found your way to this space. If you're returning, thank you for walking with me again. Today, we're diving into goodwill, not as good behavior, not as politeness, and not as people-pleasing, but as a spiritual principle that reshapes us from the inside out. Goodwill as a shift in the heart. When we talk about goodwill, most people picture kindness or generosity. And yes, kindness is part of it. Generosity is part of it. But goodwill, in the spiritual sense, is something more subtle, more adoring, and more transformative. It's the quiet shift in the heart that happens when the old instincts of fear, suspicion, defensiveness, and self-protection begin to loosen their grip. In addiction, our world shrank down to survival. Everything we did, even the things we hated ourselves for, came from that narrow, suffocating place of, I have to take care of me because no one else will. Goodwill doesn't grow well in that soil. It's too cramped, too afraid, too hungry. But recovery begins loosening that tightness. It gives us room to breathe. It gives us room to feel, and eventually it gives us room to care. The first time I truly understood goodwill was not during a service commitment, or while helping someone move, or even giving a newcomer my number. It happened in a small, forgettable moment when no one else would have noticed. I found myself softening towards someone I used to be impatient with, not because I was trying to be spiritual, or working a principle, or checking a box, but because in that moment, I genuinely wanted them to be okay. That was goodwill. It didn't come from obligation. It came from a deeper place inside me that recovery had been quietly regrowing. Goodwill isn't about doing what looks good. It's about wanting good things for others, without trying to control them, without expecting anything back, and without keeping score. And that shift, when it starts to take root, changes everything. How goodwill changes our relationships. One of the most powerful places goodwill shows up is in our relationships. especially in the relationships that survived our addiction and the ones built after we got clean. Goodwill softens assumptions. It changes the tone of our reactions. It teaches us to listen without planning our defense in the background. It lets us offer patience where we used to offer anger, or understanding where we used to offer silence. You start to realize that you no longer need to win the argument. You no longer need to prove a point. You no longer need to be the one who gets the last word. Instead, you begin noticing that your instinct is shifting toward connection over victory, toward harmony over pride, toward compassion over resentment. And what's remarkable is that none of this feels forced. It's not a script you memorize. It's something your spirit begins choosing because it just fits better now. Goodwill doesn't erase boundaries. It strengthens them. Goodwill doesn't mean you let people walk on you. It means you stop needing to walk on them. It makes space for honesty without cruelty, firmness without harshness, truth without destruction. For many of us, goodwill becomes the first language we learn after years of speaking only in fear. Goodwill in service, unity, and fellowship. Goodwill is also the backbone of NA Unity. Without goodwill, every home group would collapse under the weight of ego, impatience, and personal preference. Without goodwill, service meetings would devolve into battlegrounds of competing agendas. Without goodwill, sponsorship would be nothing more than personality guiding personality. And we know how well that works. Goodwill is what allows a group conscience to function. It's what keeps us anchored to principles rather than personalities. It's what helps us step back and ask not, what do I want, but what does this group need? What does the newcomer need? What will best serve the still suffering addict who hasn't even walked through the door yet? Goodwill rearranges our priorities in a way we don't even notice at first. You find yourself showing up early to make coffee or staying late to help stack chairs, not because it makes you look good, but because it creates a space where someone else might find what you found. You find yourself answering the phone at inconvenient times, not because you're trying to be a hero, but because someone once answered for you. And in that sense, goodwill becomes a kind of spiritual inheritance, passed down from one addict to another, generation after generation, each person giving what was freely given to them. Goodwill as a spiritual practice. There's a quiet truth about goodwill that we don't talk about enough. It's not always easy. Sometimes goodwill asks us to step beyond our comfort zone. Sometimes it asks us to offer grace when our ego wants to offer judgment. Sometimes it asks us to reach out to someone we don't particularly like, or to forgive someone who isn't asking for forgiveness, or to pause long enough to see the human being behind the behavior. But the more we practice it, the more natural it becomes. Goodwill isn't a feeling we wait for. It's a practice we grow into. We cultivate the soil for goodwill whenever we let go of the need to be right, whenever we soften our assumptions, whenever we approach someone with openness instead of suspicion. And slowly, goodwill stops being something we do and becomes part of who we are. It's in the tone of our voice. It's in the way we walk into a room. It's in the energy we carry into a conversation. It's in the relief others feel around us. Goodwill becomes a kind of presence, a subtle warmth that people sense even before we say a word. The spiritual root of goodwill. Every spiritual principle has an emotional root, and goodwill's root is love. Not romantic love, not conditional love, not the kind of love that demands recognition. Goodwill comes from the deeper, quieter love that grows when fear begins to dissolve, the love that naturally rises when we stop bracing against the world. In early recovery, we develop goodwill almost by accident. We begin caring because we're finally well enough to care. We begin listening because we finally feel heard. We begin giving because we finally believe we have something worth offering. And before long, this simple desire for good, for ourselves, for others, for our fellowship, for the world around us, becomes a guiding instinct. Goodwill becomes the spiritual posture that allows us to meet life with openness. It lets us move through the world without armor. It lets us risk connection without fearing annihilation. It lets us serve without expecting applause. And at its core, goodwill is the expression of the freedom we gain when we are no longer driven by self-centered fear. Goodwill is what love looks like when it walks. How goodwill transforms us. There's something almost embarrassing about talking openly about goodwill. It feels too soft, too sentimental, too vulnerable. But the truth is that goodwill takes tremendous courage. It's far easier to stay guarded, aloof, suspicious, or detached. Goodwill requires us to show up with our hearts unarmored. It requires us to trust the process enough to let our actions come from a place of peace rather than from a place of fear. When goodwill becomes part of us, the world feels less threatening. Our relationships feel more spacious. Our home group feels like a family. Our service work feels purposeful. Our mornings feel welcoming, and perhaps most beautifully, we begin treating ourselves with the same goodwill we offer others. We speak to others with kindness. We forgive ourselves more quickly. We allow ourselves to grow without shame. Goodwill becomes the language we speak to the world and to ourselves, and in that language, we find a deeper sense of belonging. As you move through the rest of today, I invite you to notice the small opportunities for goodwill. Not dramatic acts, not heroic gestures, just the quiet moments when you can let love move through you instead of fear. It might be the tone you choose. It might be the pause you take. It might be the choice to understand instead of react. It might be as simple as wishing good for someone who doesn't even know you're thinking of them. Goodwill doesn't have to be seen to be real. It doesn't have to be recognized to matter. It doesn't have to be rewarded to transform your life. If this message connected with you, if you felt something in it, if it reminded you of who you're becoming and why this path matters, I'd love for you to subscribe to On Life's Terms, or follow if you're watching on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that recovery is not just about staying clean. It's about growing into people capable of bringing love into the world in ways we never imagined. Leave a comment, start a conversation. Tell me how goodwill has shown up in your life. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time, your presence, and your willingness. And thank you for choosing recovery just for today. This is On Life's Terms, and today we walk in goodwill.